Greetings and salutations. I'm your host, Gabe Morales. Today we're going to cover what I consider to be the top 10 most influential Bloods and Pyrus ever. This is a follow-up to my top 10 Crip video. Again, undoubtedly there'll be some people who differ in their opinions, but this is my own personal list.
And I've spoken to many Crips and Bloods who were there in the early days, and their version of history does not match up to many other stories I've heard, especially from youngsters. I just don't take one person's word. I've done thousands of hours of research on this and spoken to hundreds of gang members.
First off is A.C. King Babalui Moses grew up in South Los Angeles, mostly on 77th and Broadway, where he's exposed to the early pioneers of the Crips gang in the late 1960s, including Raymond Washington.
According to his version of Crips history, A.C. Moses, aka King Babalui, was first a Crip. Then he switched over to the Pyrus. This is now referred to as set jumping and frowned upon, but he states he was respected by both sides, and he is one of the best historians, in my opinion, on what occurred back in the early days. AC feels that there was no political conscience among Crips or Bloods, as some would try to rewrite history to fit their own agendas, as depicted in some documentaries and books. He says, nah, we were on some gangster shit. AC says there were only about 11 hardcore Pyrus in the beginning, with around 22 supporters. But they soon acquired a big name on the streets for standing up to the Crips, and the Brims quickly became their allies.
After A.C. Moses left 77th Street due to a series of reprisals by Robert Miles and the Figueroa boys, he moved over to Piru Street with his aunt and became an original Piru member in 1970.
Compton, aka Hub City, is located in the center of Los Angeles County, just southeast of downtown LA. In 1972, the Pyrus actually functioned with the Mona Park Crips and Zane Miller and the Carver Park Crips. But because of their conflict with Mac Thomas and the Compton Crips on Grand East, the Piru boys eventually became rivals with all Crips in 1972. Other gangs that resisted the Crip invasion later became collectively known as Bloods by the late 1970s.
He wrote a book called The Starting Lineup, The Origins of the Crips and Bloods in 2016. He often appears on YouTube videos discussing the early days of both the Crips and the Bloods. And thus, A.C. King Babalui makes my list of the top 10. Fred Little Country Garrett was one of the first documented and very active Bloods in history. His career was very short-lived, as he was murdered by the Crips at a party on June 5, 1972, when the Crips and Bloods first started beefing, and his funeral was disrespected by the Crips. Some say they turned over the casket. Others say that they just made a ruckus and disrespected the body and family and attendees in other ways. But this is highly doubtful, as there was a lot of people there at the funeral. More than likely, they just caused a ruckus and then run out of there. But this event was the final straw for the Brim hating the Crips, as Little Country was loved by his friends. Veteran LAPD gang cop Bill Dunn notes the Brims were not Bloods yet. It was just Crips, Pyrus, or Brims, or other gangs that were not yet aligned. But the Crips took over a lot of gangs and converted them, or they made enemies of gangs who resisted. LAPD made a gang map in 1972, and the only ones highlighted in red were the Pyrus. Both Little Country and Big Country helped start the Blood, and his brother Big Country is known as one of the founders of the Pyrus in San Diego. While there's not a lot of documentation on him, the murder of Little Country, as well as the shooting of other non-Crip gang members in the early 1970s to mid-70s, was a big contributing factor to the Piru Blood Alliance. By the mid-1970s, Sylvester Pudding Scott was born on January 8, 1951. So he was a couple of years older than Raymond Washington. Allegedly, the Crips and Piru Street boys actually got along from 1970 to 71, but in 1972, a few incidents occurred when Pudding would have been around 20 years old. One of these incidents originally happened around Centennial High School, when some Crips were beat down by the Pyrus. Another incident is said to have happened at a party at the Nuns' house, which were well-known Pyrus in the Compton area. One is felt that Crips who crashed the party were being disrespectful. Another incident is rumored to have happened at Carver Park, which is known as Crip Turf, when the two gangs encountered each other. By the end of 1972, it was a full-on war between the Pyrus and all Crip gangs. Pudding was known as being a player with the ladies and driving nice cars, and wearing nice clothes. One of his girlfriends was Cynthia Nunn, whose brother was a very influential pirate over by Luther's Park. While Puddin was well respected in his hood, was a known drug dealer, flashy dresser, he makes my list because virtually everyone agreed he helped found the Compton Pirates. Puddin died on March 26, 2010, in the city of Compton. Vincent Owens is considered one of the co-founders of the Compton Pirates. He was born around 1956 and incarcerated during much of his 20s and 40s. He states he chose not to listen to his parents while growing up in Compton. He listened to the streets and ran with Pudding and other Pirate Street boys. By the early 1980s, he had turned his life around and was employed as a bus driver for the MTA in LA. It is interesting to me that his brother Raffer was a pastor in Compton, as well as a LA County Sheriff's deputy, and he and Vincent became very close in later years. While there's not a lot of documentation on his active years with the Pirates, Vincent Owens is a good example of how people can redeem themselves and turn around their lives if they try. And so he makes my top 10. Lorenzo, also known as L.B. Benton, is well known in the gang world by Crips and Pirates. Nearly all the post-1972 killings in Compton were Crips versus Pirates. Compton had its own police force at the time, and as an OG Compton Pirate, LB, or Low, was a close friend of AC King Babalu Moses. Benton later became affiliated with the Black Guerrilla family in prison, and he was a key player in the hunger strikes in the California Department of Corrections. The hunger strikers eventually won most of their demands, and the SHU program was totally revised, as is seen in a previous video on this channel. L.B. Benton was eventually released from prison, but has not yet appeared on any YouTube videos that I know of, and is very likely a victim of what is called SHU syndrome. That concludes part 1, the top 10 most influential Bloods and Pirates ever. Part 2 will follow soon on this channel. Thanks for watching.